Okay. All right, you guys ready to get started?
We can see you inside the mic now.
Okay. Today we are joined by Dr. John Pellitteri, a licensed psychologist. He's going to tell us a little bit about running a private practice and administering neurofeedback testing. Dr. Pellitteri has worked in a private practice for over 20 years and provides neuropsychological assessment, psychotherapy, neurofeedback, and consultation. So thank you so much for joining us. And to begin, can you tell us a little bit about your current work and educational background?
Okay, so education, I have a bachelor's degree from Cal Poly Pomona in Chicago Broncos in psychology and sociology, and a minor in criminal justice and corrections. And then I did a master's in marriage and family therapy from the University of Laverne, and then a master's and doctorate, a Psi Chi, in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology, and then a postgraduate degree in neuropsychology from the Fielding Institute, and a postdoctorate master's in clinical psychopharmacology from Chicago School of Professional Psychology. So that's my education. Work experience, I've worked at Upland Unified School District. I worked at Hillside's Home for Children, Los Angeles Police Department, Kaiser Hospital Rehab Unit, and the brain injury team. And then I've been full-time at Mount San Antonio College as a counselor and as a psychology department faculty, and my private practice in Rancho Cucamonga for about 20 years. And there I do psychotherapy and mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, neurofeedback, and neuropsychological assessment. So the older you get, the longer that list gets. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. I also want to mention that if anyone has any questions to ask, please feel free to raise your hand and ask them. Okay.
For your education, did you do that all sequentially? Like doing it all one back to back?
So bachelor's, first master's, second master's, doctorate, postdoctorate training, all, and then a break. And then I just did the master's in clinical psychopharmacology. I finished it in 2022, so that was kind of coming back to it. No gap years for me. Yeah.
Do you also combine that with during that with times where you work at well, like
Yeah. I was working throughout, that whole process. So eventually at higher and higher levels. So when I was doing my neuropsychology program, some of the requirements for that was a 1,000-hour practicum where you're doing neuropsychological assessment and 200 hours of direct supervision from a board-certified clinical neuropsychologist. But at that point, I was already licensed as a psychologist. So I was doing those hours as part of my private practice and getting paid for it. So that was a cool little, I ran kind of it's not a scam, but I ran a little scam where I offered low-cost neuropsychological assessment to some of my referral sources in the community. And they flooded me with patients because I was super cheap. And then that got me a lot of cases so I could get my 1,000 hours. And then as soon as I finished that and got my degree in that, then I raised all my prices.
Do you have a part-time job while working at
Yeah, in fact, when I finished, I was doing, I taught karate for many years. And then after I decided I didn't want to earn my living punching and kicking people, I really hit school hard. And I worked, I don't even remember where I worked, probably karate until I got my first master's. And then I was able to go to Mount SAC and just do a part-time counselor position because I had a master's. and that was like, at those days, 25 bucks an hour was a lot of money. So that helped me kind of get through graduate school. At least fed me and, you know, got my car with gas and all that. They don't really like you to work during graduate school because my first year you have 9 classes, you know, and it's pretty rigorous. But, you know, what are you going to do? You got to work. You know, you can only take so much student loan out. And so the Mount San Antonio College counselor job part-time helped me get through my doctorate and then opening my private practice. And then at a certain point, the job at Mount SAC, the job itself went full-time. And so I had the decision to make, do I go ahead and apply for that and become a full-time professor there? Or do I go somewhere else? And I had a couple of life situations where I was going to be working at Kaiser Hospital and at Mount SAC full-time in both, 2 full-time jobs. But then at the last minute, the Kaiser one fell apart. And so I was kind of stuck with just my professor job at Mount SAC. And the money was great, the benefits were great. The only problem was it wasn't earning the hours toward licensure at that time. And I wanted to get licensed so that I could start working as a psychologist. So instead of working at Kaiser, I had to kind of cobble together and get my hours elsewhere. And so then that became kind of a thing. You know, a lot of students ask that kind of question. Graduate school really teaches you that the day is 12 hours long. It's not 8 hours. You know, you think, oh, I got an 8-hour day. No, you do go to school half the day, you go to work half the day, you do your internship for half the day. You know, now we're at 3.5 days or something like that. And so that's really where I learned to be working all day long. As long as you're doing things you like, it's okay. But at first it's hard. You know, in case you haven't heard this, graduate school is hard. So did I get around to your question eventually? Okay. So I did, a lot of those things I mentioned were pre-doctoral hours that counted, like LAPD and Kaiser. And then my postdoc hours, I did learning disability assessment. I also was a supervisor at the University of Laverne for their assessment program and as a postdoc. And so that got me hours. They didn't pay, but I got hours for that. So you need 3,000 hours to be able to sit for your licensure, to be a licensed psychologist. You can do half of those hours pre-degree. So as you're earning your doctorate, you can earn up to half of those hours. Nobody gets all of that half, but you do get a chunk of it. And then after you graduate, you're on your own to find your own hours. You can do that with a formal postdoc program, or you can do it by working under another licensed psychologist. And there are other types of little experiences you could do. Like some of my colleagues went to work in the prisons, and the prisons are good in that you can finish all your hours up in about 9 months because you're able to count like 8 hours a day. Versus some places you can, even though you have to work 8 hours, you're only doing like 4 or 5 countable hours because only certain activities are countable. Direct patient service, a little bit of paperwork, a little bit of training, but really, you know, direct patient service gives you those hours. So, sure. It gets very complicated, and so, you know, if you think of it as eating an elephant 1 bite at a time, you know, so what you guys are doing is great, finishing up your bachelor's degree. The next step is going to be either a master's or a doctorate, depending on what kind of, you know, life you want to have. So I think you all probably know this, but a lot of students don't, that you can apply for a doctorate program right out of your bachelor's. So you go from your bachelor's right to a doctorate program. You can usually pick up a master's along the way, though it's not necessary. If you have a doctorate in something, you don't need a master's in it, you've already got it. And so that's how you move forward. Where you can be, some do, yeah, they're called endowed doctorates. Yeah, that would be great. PsyDs, and I'm a PsyD. There's 2 degrees that we could be talking about, a PhD and a PsyD. PhD is a more academic degree, a PsyD is a more practitioner degree. PsyDs you earn in private schools or professional schools, and they don't usually fund you. So that's a fairly high monetary commitment. PhD programs, you can find, especially if you're a top student, they're very expensive, very competitive. But if you get one of those, you get a free ride. That's amazing. You know, from that much no debt. Those are very challenging to get, but you're in the right place to try for one. So that's good.
Could you explain what a day working in a private practice is like?
Well, my day would be, I run a practicum through my private practice of undergraduate students who are interested in learning more about psychology and the work that I do. And I teach them psychometry, in other words, psychological testing and neurofeedback. So I'm training them. And then I'll have 1 or 2 private psychotherapy clients. So I'll do psychotherapy. I like to do a little bit of that. It's not what I want to do all day, every day. And then if I have a neuropsych testing case, then a person will come in and I will either interview them or do the next step of testing with them, sometimes 2 or 3 hours of testing. And then they'll leave and I'll do some scoring and start writing reports, and that could be a normal day. So one of the things I really enjoy about private practice is there's a little bit of everything. You know, I'm not somebody who likes to do the same thing over and over again. I have colleagues who do psychotherapy 8 hours a day, and that to me is just too much. I can't remember what I'm talking about anymore. It's not my interest. So I keep my psychotherapy low. I really like neuropsychological assessment, doing the testing. It's like being a detective of the brain. And so that to me is a lot of fun. So that's what I enjoy doing. But a little bit of psychotherapy keeps my skills in. So that's why I do that. So a little bit of everything. Training, teaching, neuroscience assessment, mindfulness, if I can.
Could you explain what neurofeedback is and what neurofeedback testing can tell you about your client that the talk therapy can't?
So neurofeedback is a training protocol where basically we do, EEG, electroencephalogram. So we put sensors on the scalp. Back in my day, they call them electrodes, but that freaks people out. So now we call them sensors, okay? Because you're not doing anything to the brain. You're just measuring, just like putting a temperature thing on your skin or something. And we can see their brainwave patterns. Now, we know enough about the brain to know that if you have slowing in certain parts of the brain or too much fast wave in a certain part of the brain, that can lead to certain symptomatology. So for example, if you have too much fast wave in the back, well, some of the things that can go along with that are insomnia or anxiety or mental fatigue, forgetting what you just read when you read something. If you have too much slow in the front, you could have ADHD, you could have a sluggishness, you could have something that goes along with a preponderance of slow waves. You guys ready to? So neurofeedback is, the first thing we do is we do an assessment. And the assessment involves moving the sensors around and taking measurements with eyes open and eyes closed, under task, which means like you're counting to yourself or something. And then we look at what this is compared to this, eyes open versus eyes closed, according to this, and so forth. I'm not going to be able to compete with the cool, colorful slides. So what's your name?
Misa.
Misa?
Mm-hmm.
So this is Misa's raw EEG tracing. And we have one electrode sensor on the top of her scalp here. So it's measuring right down the longitudinal fissure and right before with the central sulci. So this is right in the middle. So it's getting kind of the whole brain. So we can see this raw tracing here. Now what this part is it's cutting up this EEG tracing into discrete bins. So we have slow wave. These are slow theta waves, delta, alpha, what's called SMR, or sensory motor rhythm, and then beta and fast beta. And this is actually, the 60 hertz right here is actually the electricity of the walls. These are extremely sensitive sensors. So what this program is doing is using depending on how far you have gone in math, you might recognize a fast Fourier transformation. All right, well, what that transformation is is that it says that you can take any sine wave and break it into its constituent parts. And that's what this computer is doing, is it's breaking these down super fast, like within half a second. And so that's what we get all these bins. Now, all of this is electrical activity, and all of your muscles and all of your neurons work on electrical activity. We know that. So if I ask Misa to grit her teeth, you can see that all that muscle and electricity is being captured by the sensor, and it goes kind of crazy. Also, if I put my finger on it, then I can act as an antenna with any electricity in the room, and that messes it up a little bit too. So we don't want that happening. We don't want 60 hertz because that's not brain waves. So what we can see here, and now this is a signal test screen, so we can just see whether or not we have good signal, which we do. But these are slow, sleepy waves. These are drowsy, alpha state, watching TV, drooling a little bit waves. And then these are thinking waves. And the higher up we go, the faster the wave is. So we could do an assessment where we move the sensors around and measure in different parts of the brain. And then we can hypothesize what type of issues she might be having, if any. Now, if we were doing this for realsies, we would look at the results, and I might sit down with her and I'd say, you need to verify these kind of hypotheses. Like, for example, the EEG shows that you have too much fast wave over here, and that can result in, say, sleep problems. Do you have sleep problems? And then she'd have to verify that for me in real life, because functionally we need to know if this fits. Now, one thing that I always find is when I do this printout of the neuro assessment and I give it to someone, they're always looking at it going, oh my gosh, how did it know? Which is kind of interesting to say, because all we're doing is measuring your brain waves. It's kind of like taking a picture of you and then showing you the picture and you going, it looks just like me. You know, of course it does. That's your picture. And the same kind of thing with this, you know, of course it's nailing what's happening with you, because that's your brainwaves. So, but there are some that may be more problematic for you than others. So we'll want to decide on what kind of training protocol we want. So for example, let's say she's having trouble with fuzzy thinking. And we found with the brainwave patterns that she has too much slow wave in her front left area, and that's typical of ADHD. Theta, which is a slow wave, and beta is a fast wave, and those in relation to each other is not optimal. Have you ever wondered why with someone with ADHD, which as a kid usually exhibits as hyperactivity, why do we give them stimulants? You know, the two drugs that we prescribe for ADHD are methylphenidate and amphetamine. So these are stimulants, these are uppers. Why would you speed up a kid that's already not bouncing off the wall?
Is it because you would like to stimulate a specific part of the brain to which would do regulations of hyperactivity?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So the left frontal area has too much slow wave compared to fast wave. So what happens to someone that has too much slow wave in the front? Well, they do things to keep them kind of alert and awake. And, you know, it's not a fatigue like in your body, like you're tired to go to sleep. This is a dullness that you have in your frontal cortex. And the compensation is to keep moving and keep yourself distracted and keep finding, you know, squirrel, 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 like that. So we give methylphenidate, it speeds up that area of the brain, and the kid can relax and focus. All of us actually would focus better if we took Ritalin, you know, but people with ADHD, it's going to be a difference between a clinical problem and kind of normal functioning. For the rest of us, we need to study more. There's a reason medical doctors pop those Ritalins when they're studying, because they have access to the medical cabinet. As psychologists, we don't get the key, so we don't get to do that. We have to study the old-fashioned way. We have to earn it. So, so the training would be, let's say we are going to work on this theta to beta ratio in the left frontal. We would bring her into the office, we'd hook up a sensor right there, and then we would set up some kind of activity or game. Now, with kids, we're gonna use like video games. I had an 8-year-old that I was working with that had some problems the same way. And I had his mom bring in a video that he loved to watch. He loved to watch G.I. Joe, that movie, not the cartoony stuff. And so we took it, we burned it into the program in chapters and chunks, and then we played it for him. So he would come in and he would sit in this nice comfy chair. We'd hook him up. He didn't care about that. And he would watch his movie that he doesn't get to watch very much at home. And when his brain waves were in the correct theta to beta ratio, the movie played nice and big and loud and clear. And as his brain got distracted, the movie would start to stutter and shrink and gray out a little bit, which is annoying when you're trying to watch a movie. And he didn't have to know nothing about brainwaves and software or anything. All he had to do was bring a desire to watch the movie with him. And once he did that, his brain will figure out how to get what he wants. Now, the neurofeedback started, in the 60s and the 50s with training cats on how to increase their alpha frequency. So if you can train a cat to increase their alpha frequency by rewarding it for that behavior, you can train a human to do all sorts of things. In fact, the year that Italy won the National Cup in soccer, they had gone through a peak performance neurofeedback training. And nowadays, the Air Force, the Navy is using neurofeedback to help fighter pilots in Miramar not wash out of their fighter training program. Because one of the things they found is that in order to be a fighter pilot, you have to switch between fast bursts of thinking and relax for a minute so you don't burn out and get too fatigued. So when they had pilots about to fail out of their program, they give them this training that kind of distinguishes between this fast and slow wave bouncing back and forth. And they've had a statistically significant number of fighter pilots that have been able to finish the course that we're probably going to be able to do it. So there are little games we can play. You can watch movies for adults. I would have Misa come in and relax and then maybe listen to music she liked, usually without any vocals, we turn the lights down. And all she does is listen to the music. And if she likes the music, she'll want it to play. And as her brain is in the right configuration, the music plays nice and loud and clear. If she starts to get out of that area, it starts to get quieter and quieter, which is not optimal for her. And that's it. That's neurofeedback training in a nutshell.
Can you do like that?
Can you pull up, say, Sten's lab and do, let's see, let's do
That one looks really
fruit
cool.
race.
This one?
Yeah,
Okay.
see if we can get him to play. Hold on, go ahead. So this is the example of a feedback screen that's pretty advanced. Now, this is not what we show the client, because it's gobbledygook. But you can set up to 12 different criteria for her to get the music to play. Your brain is amazing, but I'm not the first one to tell you that. You can get it to do all sorts of things. Try L for load.
Sure.
Yeah, L for load. Let's load a screen to show. So L. We're not able to load.
My friend's saying no.
Saying no. Who's in charge? Hit stop. No.
What song was that?
That I don't know. Now try L.
Okay, there we go.
Let's so this is an example of little clips of movies here that are burned in there. Go down and do, yeah. Let's do Sten's lab neurofeedback. Try this fruit race. No, record. So if this plays, we're going to have some trouble with Yeah. Let's see. So the animation isn't coming up, but what we would be doing is we'd be inhibiting theta, which is starting to drift off to sleep. We'd be inhibiting high beta, which is fast anxious. And then we'd be rewarding an alpha state. And that means every time that it's over this threshold, what it looks like is three worms. One's red, one's blue, one's green. And you try to make all the person who's doing the neurofeedback has to do is be rooting for the green one. And by hoping the green worm is going to win, that is going to give, being able to see the worm work its way across the screen is enough to increase these alpha waves. And then if the red or blue worm, they got to be kind of thinking like, no, I don't want you to win. And that's exactly what will happen. Let's L and see if we can find a screen that we can show a little better.
That one worked last time.
Is this the same? Oh, yeah.
How do you differentiate and code these things? Like for the snakes, like to make sure a person is cheering for the snake.
We tell them. We say what I'd like you to do. And we don't want to cause you to have any anxiety because that will bring the red worm in charge. So I don't say, you better have that green worm. You know, we say, this is the neurofeedback mindfulness kind of way to do it. It would be good if the green worm won. And that's enough for people to go, oh, I'm interested in that happening. The same thing with the music. We say, it would be good if the music plays louder. Versus really try to make the music play louder. Because trying is kind of the opposite of what we want. And that will increase, see if the Space Invaders animation works.
Yeah.
We're not going to get any animations today, are we? Try one more. L for load. Get back us down to Sten's by neuro. Okay, let's try Stephanie's happy face. All right. So here's an example also. Now, again, you don't have to know any of the science behind it. All you have to do is be interested. And practically without telling you, everybody likes the smiley face better than the frowny face. So you just watch it, and I might mention to you that the little dings are points, you know, and those people like to rack up points even though they don't mean anything. It's still kind of good training. So as you're watching this now, we're not doing this because she's not watching and we don't have it set up that way, but and it takes some time.
I can see it through the window.
I was wondering how you were watching
I
it.
know.
Right. So now she's seems to be nice and relaxed, and that's a good run.
The power is within you.
Yeah. And what I would say to Misa is when she does a particularly good job and she's got it smiley for a while, I might stop the program and say to her, you know, it seems like you're really in the zone here. What are you doing? And a lot of times clients will say, well, I'm picturing myself in a warm bath, or I'm just really trying to focus on my breathing. And a lot of times what we do is we teach them breathing exercises before they do the training. And so if they're having a lot of failure, I might say, try your breathing exercises and see if that helps. And then she starts breathing and she starts getting more smiley face. And then the neurotherapist over there will gently start to make it a little more challenging. Just like adding more weight if you were at the gym. If you're really good now, we're going to make it a little harder. And as she goes up and up, over the course of about 5 or 6, 7 treatments, we start to see the average time spent in the band that we're interested in going up and up and up and up. And that almost always corresponds to the client saying, you know, how I'm just sleeping better, I'm feeling better, I'm getting more restful sleep, I dropped off the other night. The number one thing people say after they start neurofeedback is they'll go, I just had these wicked dreams. I've had these wild, amazing dreams. That's always the first thing. And the good thing about neurofeedback too, compared to so many other treatments like medication, is that there's really no downside. The worst thing that could happen is you come in next week and you say, yeah, after that one, I felt kind of foggy and I couldn't concentrate very well. Okay, well, we'll change up the training a little bit so that we don't reinforce that. And those side effects will go away. Or if you said, and this never happens, but you could say, oh, I had a headache after my last training. Okay, well then we'll make sure that we don't do that training again. We'll adjust it so that that goes away. All right, so there's lots of different programs in here, movies, music, and we can tailor it to the interest of the client.
What are some common misconceptions you hear about neurofeedback testing?
So one of the things about neurofeedback is that you're not doing anything to the person. So there are different types of protocols called like audiovisual entrainment. And audiovisual entrainment would be putting these particular glasses on and these earphones on, and that is eliciting neural firing. So you'll get these flashes and you'll hear these beats, like a rave kind of thing, and it'll go back and forth, and that's actually doing something to your brain. And the type of machine I have actually has a little finger clip, and it adds a tiny bit of electricity to you. It doesn't feel like a taser. It just feels a little warm. But adding that, the research shows pretty clearly that adding that extra little boost really amplifies the effect. So that's doing something to your brain. This is only measuring what's happening anyway and allowing you to adjust it, because by showing this to Misa, we're making her brain waves available to her conscious mind. So one big misconception about neurofeedback is that you are doing something to them. No, you're just measuring what's happening. It's kind of like putting a temperature thing on or something like that. So the other misconception is that it can fix everything. It can't fix everything. There are certain things you wouldn't want to use it for, like serious mental illness. So if Misa has schizophrenia, we probably wouldn't want her hooked up to, okay, thanks for confirming. If she has epilepsy, that would be another thing. Okay, good, we're all right. But other than that, you know, it would not work. It probably wouldn't hurt, but it wouldn't help bipolar disorder. Major depression, there might be some good effect, or anxiety. Anything neuropsychiatric, so sleep, attention, cognition, those are its hallmarks. Sleep, ADHD is the gold standard. It's been shown by research to be as efficacious as medication, so without any side effects. So there's some really powerful things you can use it on. But there's some things that, you know, if someone comes in with a broken arm, so I always, you know, evaluate very carefully what people want to work on, so whether or not this is the right tool.
What is something you really enjoy or find rewarding about your job?
Well, anytime I feel like I've made a difference, I've had, being a how many of you want to be a therapist of some type? Right, not sure, or maybe a little bit, psychotherapist, psychologist, marriage and family therapist, those kind of things. Okay, so you don't get rewards a whole lot. Like if you are a tow truck driver, you're always rescuing people and taking their car into the shop. Everyone's always glad to see it, right? Or you know, a firefighter, you know, they're always saving people's lives, you know, for a lot of times. So psychologists, their rewards come few and far between, but when they do come, they're very rewarding and heartening. So I've heard, you know, a couple say to me, "You saved our marriage," which is nice to hear. Or, you know, "You've made me a better parent," or "I feel better because of you." That's always very good. Those are the best parts of the job, when I hear like that. Or when I do a lot of teaching and training, when I have students call me years later, "Remember me? You know, I certainly remember you. You helped me, you know, immensely, and now I'm this because of you." I have a couple of students now that are psychologists themselves, and I just heard from one like last week saying, "I just want you to know." In fact, you guys met Tracy.
Dr. Lovelock.
Okay. Dr. Love, she was my student Psych 1A, so I still call her Tracy. But she emailed me and said, "This is my 15th year as a psychologist, and I owe it to you." So those feel good.
That's something you might challenge about your job.
Insurance, paperwork, working, doing paperwork at Mount SAC, you know, writing reports that nobody reads, that kind of stuff. Same kind of thing that everybody's going to have in every job somewhere.
Has there been a point in your academic or professional career where you had to pivot in a direction that you weren't expecting? And how did you manage that?
You know, this is something interesting. You're going to just keep letting her.
Yeah, I'm like,
You can go back to the signal check screen if you like. You know, part of what I did for many, many years was career counseling. And what I now believe is that your career unfolds in front of you. That you could have all the plans in the world, but being a little bit flexible is important. Because you will come to 3 or 4 major forks in the road. And based on your best guess, you'll pick one. And usually those turn out to be great. But you know, all of a sudden, you know, my dad dies and I inherited this condo that had a lot of money that was owed to grandma about it. So my dad borrowed money from grandma, and I was the oldest grandchild, and the family came to me and said, you need to live in the condo and you need to pay grandma back because she needs that money. Nobody's paying grandma back if we don't have somebody doing it. And so that was kind of a fork in the road. I could have said, no way, you know. But instead I took that and I moved into the condo, and that anchored me to Southern California, and that made me pick schools in the area. And so that was a fork in the road. Now it was my decision. I could have said, forget it to the family, but you know, gotta love grandma, and grandma needs her money back, you know, so we gotta take care of grandma. And so that was a little fork in the road. I don't think any of the forks in the road I've ever taken I've regretted. I think they've all been good. But there have been, like, there was a time when I had to choose between what I thought was Kaiser Hospital and Mount Sac, and I wanted Kaiser, but Mount Sac paid great, more money, stability, insurance, retirement. Kaiser, neuropsych, like I trained in the hospital, fun, crazy, fast. Kind of tried to straddle both of them. At a certain point I had to choose, and I chose Mount Sac. That was a good choice, because now toward the end of my career, I've got a good retirement and been able to afford. One of my kids is in a UC school, and I've been able to support her and pay for her tuition and all that. And so that was a good choice.
Thank you. Does anybody
You're
else?
welcome.
Oh, thanks. Does anybody else have any questions?
In terms of because you are active, I was wondering in terms of insurance, you say you struggle with that? Do you mean like insurance with the company and trying to basically account for that in payments, or basically dealing with the insurance company?
Insurance, if you want to take insurance, which lots of clients need you to take their insurance because they can't afford out of pocket, then you have to sign on with these insurance companies. And the insurance companies want to tell you how to do your job. So a lot of times I would apply for this insurance for this client, and somebody who didn't even have a bachelor's degree would be reading their rules and say denied. And I said, you can't deny this. This is a suicidal client, and I need to see them. Go ahead and see them, but we're not paying. And so you have to write an appeal, and you have to justify everything, and they're not very forthcoming in their rules a lot of times. So there's I don't take insurance anymore because my specialty is such that I don't have to, but I'm sorry about that. If a client comes in and they say, do you take Anthem or Magellan or something? I say, I'm sorry, I don't take it. Like, when I really want to come to you and I can't afford it, I'll slide down as far as I can to make it worth it for you, but I just can't. I'll give you the bills and you can argue with your insurance company, but I can't spend all that time. It's not worth it to be dealing with that. And then as a consumer of insurance, we're getting, I can't think of a better word, screwed on the other side. One of my sons has some significant support needs and very medically, and if we didn't have every insurance we could possibly get, they would have bankrupted us, long ago. And 25% of all bankruptcies in the United States are due to medical problems, because you don't have any choice, right? Grandma's sick, you got to get her well. Your brother breaks his leg, you got to fix it. So, and they know this. So, not good. That's one of my.
Anybody else have any questions?
Get started.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. If you have any questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes and Gotta clean these up. Thanks for being a volunteer.
I was just curious. So, which UC does your daughter attend?
I think one of the best ones, way better than any of the other UCs.
Really?
Yeah. UCR.
Oh wait.
That's
R?
her.
Oh my gosh.
Breaking the fourth wall.
That's crazy.
Do you wanna update?
Also, I'm just curious, how much does one of those setups cost? Because I just want to.
You want one of them?
I wanna try.
I'm like, I want to play with it. It looks fun.
I totally think you should play with it, but not mine. That little amplifier costs about $7,000.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Pocket
Okay.
change.
All right. I'll have to
Can I show?
save up a little bit.
That's a lot.
Yeah, what do you want?
I want to show them the newest thing.
The newest thing. Do you need internet?
Oh, I do. So definitely. So the newest, there's a new product that looks like a big helmet. It's made in Korea, and it's a gel-less EEG, actually QEEG. So 19 channels all at once. You just put it on like a big hat, and it's like an Iron Man thing that it kind of closes around you to a certain thing. And that's $65,000.
Wow.
And if one of my supervisors in QEG is getting that training in it, but that's going to be fantastic. It does everything for you, hooks up to the internet, trains you immediately, but I ain't there yet, so.
That's almost as much as like, I don't know, 2 years at a university.
Oh, sorry.
Can neurofeedback help with the things like things which are also cognitive things?
I've not seen any research on that, so I'm not sure. I don't know. There are, usually it's mirror box kind of stuff, like Ramachandra's working at down in San Diego, but
So that one, that one makes sense. Like, but it's like, because I was thinking, like, to be interesting to do that.
there's your distribution right there. Do